This is the College Hockey News Insiders Podcast.
Wilmer behind the back, spinorama, he scores! What a goal by Jeremy Wilmer!
Discussion.
Into the net with a shot, he scores! Owen Mike goes 4-2, Western Michigan.
Opinion.
Back into the near circle, fires, he scores! Hysteria here in Hockey Valley as Penn State upsets number 2 Minnesota.
Special guests and your listener questions.
The icing is waved and it's over! Western Michigan has won it. The Broncos are the Frozen Four champions of 2025.
Taking you through the world of college hockey, here are your hosts, Adam Roden and Mike McMahon.
All right, we are ready now for conference tournament championship weekend. So here we are, and that means Selection Sunday, as it were. Maybe not as exciting as basketball's because we'll know who's in as of Saturday night for sure. Maybe even earlier than that. And we already know most of the teams in, as a matter of fact, but there is still some intrigue. Check out College Hockey News. You Are the Committee tool is up there. Just go to our front page, click from there if you got it, and figure it out yourself. And also an article up there as to what's going on and our probability matrix and whatever else is going on these days. So there you go. Are you feeling your team is involved? Merrimack in the Final Four. And could upset the apple cart for a lot of teams. And you know what? If they do make it, they're going to be they might be, I don't know if they can get as high as 14, but definitely 15.
Can they really? I don't even know where they are right now.
Well, they're above the two Atlantic hockey teams, right? So if you look at the actual MPI right now, Merrimack is 24, Bentley is 25, and Sacred Heart is 28. So Bentley and Sacred Heart are playing for the Atlantic Championship. If Merrimack were to somehow win the Hockey East tournament, they would definitely be above Bentley and Sacred Heart. So that would give them at least 15, right? I don't think that they would get above. Currently, Minnesota State is 17, St. Thomas is 14. Those are the two CCHA schools going at it. And also Augustana is still a possibility at sitting at 16, so Merrimack probably couldn't pass them. But it would make it interesting in that sense that, and this same goes true for Clarkson, as a matter of fact. Clarkson's still alive in the ECAC. That would hoist the CCHA champ up to 14, basically. So that is still possible. It's also possible that the CCA champ finishes 15 and St. Thomas finishes 14, and two CCHA teams get in.
If I have it correct, though, the two CCHA teams that play this weekend, it's only going to be one of them. If they get two in, it would be Augustana and whoever wins.
Right. So
the two teams playing this weekend can't both get in, I don't think.
And so a bunch has to go right for Augustana, but that is possible. I want to say it involves Minnesota State winning, but I'm not sure that matters as much as what happens with UConn and UMass. I think that's the key there for them, right?
That makes sense, yeah. Because I know they could both, UMass and UConn can both get an at-large, but only if they win on Friday.
Right.
They're both the loss on Friday. So we know that Friday's an elimination game in Hockey East on both sides, but even still, even if one of those teams loses on Saturday in the championship game, they still need a lot of help. So it's not like they wouldn't be a favorite to land an at-large bid necessarily, not right now. We'll see what happens with the rest of Friday night. But, they would need to get some help if they were to lose on Saturday. But I guess mathematically there's a chance there. Yes.
And it's interesting, too, because as I wrote in my article, the top four seeds are completely locked in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, because 2, 3, and 4 are done. They all lost this past weekend. And Denver is still playing, but cannot catch Western Michigan, even if they beat Duluth. Western is 4, Denver is 5, and Duluth is 6. So, and Denver and Duluth are playing each other. North Dakota is 2. The weekend started with those 4 teams 2 through 8, and it ended with those 4 teams 2 through 6, because Duluth beat North Dakota and Providence lost. So craziness abounds there. And, to me, I don't know if this, at the end of the day, is it going to matter that much? But I am I guess it's more important whether you make it or not, but I do think one of the interesting questions is going to be what happens in terms of placement of the 4 number 1 seeds. And you've got to figure that Michigan to Albany, because that is the closest technically, and
yep, I would agree.
No reason to put them anywhere else. Same for North Dakota and Sioux Falls. But then it'll get interesting between Michigan State and Western Michigan, between Worcester and Loveland, which are, 2,200 miles apart. So, it's a big difference between the two as to where they go. And both are far from Michigan, although Loveland is obviously much further from both. But Denver being the potential 5 or 6 seed and having to be in Loveland is going to make that interesting. Does the committee automatically just pair Denver with, if Denver finishes 5, so the 4 team will be there. If Denver finishes 6, the 3 team will be there. Yeah. I wrote in my article that I would prefer them to avoid Western Michigan in that second round possibility at all costs. However, the committee does not listen to me on that. They have not listened to me in 23 years since it went to 16 teams. That used to be a very big thing in the 90s, early 2000s, in a 12-team tournament. They used to go all extra mile to avoid that game against 2 teams that played 4 times this year and just played in their conference tournament semis to avoid that matchup again, but they don't seem to care about that anymore. I mean, it just happened last year. It didn't happen because Western and Denver played in the Frozen Four, which is fine, after playing in the conference final. So anyway, they don't listen to me on that anymore, but that used to be a pretty big deal to try to avoid, and I would like to see that be the case. I remember clear as a bell in 2003, first year of the 16-team tournament. I've said this before, but we got I was working at ESPN at the time, so I was at the selection show like before it was even aired. So I saw the bracket. I was like, oh, I was trying to how? Because we had, us nerds had that 12-team process down, right? We knew they're going to avoid these second-round matchups and first-round matchups as much as possible. Tweak this, that, the other thing, blah, 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 blah. And then the bracket was completely different. And we're like, what is going on here? And it took me a while for it to sink in that they just went straight 1 through 16 serpentine. That had not been the case prior to that. We knew who was going to get in, but we didn't know how they're going to be bracketed. So from that point on, the 1 through 16 serpentine order became like the thing. And that's been the thing for 23 years now. So
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I would like to see them avoid it if they could, but I think that's what they're going to do. I don't think that they're going to do that. I think they're going to do exactly what you said. Mm-hmm. I think if Denver's the 5, Western Michigan goes to Loveland. If Denver's the 6, Michigan State goes to Loveland. That's what I think they're going to do. Yeah. And then bracket everything from there, and break up first round games that they have to break up, and maybe I don't know, because we don't have numbers on this. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to do if there's not enough help that naturally falls into Albany, maybe they try to get a team in there for attendance purposes just so that it's not a complete embarrassment, because I just don't think it's going to be a very big crowd unless you get some serious help there to sell tickets. So that's something to look for, because it wasn't a very big crowd last time. But, if you can somehow shoehorn Cornell into Albany along with, Providence or something like that, it gets a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, Quinnipiac will bring an okay crowd there. It's not too far. I'm not sure about UConn if they wind up there. Cornell and Penn State, I think, would be the biggest ones.
Yeah, I think UConn would bring a decent crowd. And the reason why is if you look at where they were last year. So they made the tournament last year, first time they ever made the tournament, right? And they were, where were they? They were in Allentown, which I think that did pretty well. I think they brought a pretty decent crowd to Allentown. Albany's a little bit closer. I think, especially with some of the games that they've had this year, they've attracted big crowds. I mean, granted, these are home games, right? And some of them at the XL Center, but when they played BC at the XL Center in the middle of February, they had almost 11,000 people at the game.
Yeah, well, true enough. I mean, a little closer, obviously, but of
course, yeah.
But they, showing that they will bring crowds. There's still plenty up for grabs in the ECAC because Cornell and Dartmouth are pretty safely in the tournament. 8-9 the MPI right now. They are playing semifinals, not against each other. 2 teams that could upset the apple cart. I mean, speaking of that, Clarkson knocking off Quinnipiac. I mean, I don't know if it's shocking that they knocked off the number 1 seed Quinnipiac because I said going in that Clarkson was a pain in the neck, and I didn't want to play them if I had to, whoever I was. They've had some really bad games this year and really good games. They're a younger team, but they just play like just pain in the neck. I mean, it's J.F. Uhl, head coach. If you saw him play, they play like he does, and there's like 20 of them. And, I don't know if they have the skill that he had, but that's how they play. And so they go, the Quinnipiac, they win the first game, dominated it. And, Quinnipiac has the sort of snarky history of winning the league in the regular season, not getting anywhere in the postseason, but they usually make the semifinals at least. So
they usually end up in Lake Placid at least.
Yeah, that Saturday game, up 3-1, power play, 8 minutes to go. You're like, okay, that's it. Let's go to Sunday. I don't usually, I hate talking about like, oh, teams choke and this, that, and the other thing. But I have not seen a bigger meltdown in my life. 2 shorthanded goals on that power play. So not only do they not expand their lead or hold it, they allow 2. And then just as the penalty expires, 30 seconds later, Clarkson gets another one.
Yep.
What the heck was that? I was like, I couldn't believe it. In a span of like 2 minutes, they got 3 goals, 2 shorthanded, and they win it 4-3. So just crazy. And, boy, go look at the video of that second goal. The first shorthanded one. I mean, the right point guy for Quinnipiac got the puck on a pass, started skating towards the middle of the ice, and just decided to leave the puck at the right point. he skated about 20 feet before realizing he didn't have the puck. Clarkson player just swooped right in. Thank you very much. Went down the ice, scored, and that was the end of that. So, wow, that was crazy. But that leaves it open now. Cornell trying for their 3rd in a row. Dartmouth trying for their first ever ECAC tournament championship. And Princeton and Clarkson have been there and done that against each other, as a matter of fact. Many epic battles. But, all right, well, Hockey East-wise, Boston College is through. That happened Friday. Providence did not make it. They lose to the aforementioned Merrimack. And then you've got UConn and UMass. So what do you make of that at the moment?
I don't really know. That Merrimack Providence game on Saturday was kind of nuts. Like, there were multiple times in that game where it's funny because I wrote a column on this in the Tribune last week about there's just something with this Merrimack team that every time it seems like something's happened that's going to knock them out, they find a way to stay alive. They
got Colby Cohen on one of the goals.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And even throughout the course of the year, I think they went like 1-7 through a stretch in November. And you're like, well, this team just doesn't have it. They're too young. Then they put it together and went on a run. Then they lost 3 in a row towards the end of the regular season. And you're like, all right, well, here it is. Like, there was a nice little run, but here it is. And then they're like undefeated in their last 5 again. So they've been able to get back on the horse there. And then, like you said, even through the course of that game, between the John Mustard goal, which got tipped up over the shoulder of a standing 6'5" Max Lundgren.
Just floated right over his head and in. Just like what Colby did in the 2009 finals.
Yeah. Yeah. You had that. You had them, potentially losing Justin Gill, who's been one of their best forwards, on a kneeing penalty. He ended up coming back in the game, actually set up the game-winning goal. So I don't know. It just feels like every time they've been able to absorb some punches this year, and they've been pretty resilient at different times, and they figure out ways to keep themselves in the fight somehow. So it's kind of funny. Like, UMass and Merrimack both have had very similar seasons in the sense that they struggled at the beginning of the year. They both went on really good second half runs. I don't know the exact numbers. I think UMass is something like 11-5-1 in the second half, and Merrimack is 10-5-2 or 11-5-2, something like that.
Yeah.
They both have really good goaltending. Like, it's just they're very similar. UMass obviously ended up as the 2 seed, but they're very similar in how their seasons have developed and how their teams are built. And I think it's going to be a pretty close matchup. They played 2 pretty close games in January too. UMass won them both, but I know Merrimack felt like they deserved a better fate in the Friday game. I think it was the 16th of January, and then UMass took it to them on the 17th. But both those games, and then UConn and BC. I mean, it's very rare in Hockey East to have 4 teams in the semifinals on that Friday that are all fighting for their lives. All 4 of them could get eliminated. It's rare that happens. So I think that's going to make for a pretty exciting weekend.
Well, we thought, NCHC was two good. Well, the Denver game was tremendous overtime with Western. I mean, just again, those two battling it out was amazing at Magnus. Just great hockey there, and we'll talk more about that later. But Duluth going to Grand Forks and winning big was just a little bit of surprise the way they did it. But, certainly obviously capable, being a top 8 going in, now 6th in the MPI. So, the CCHA kind of goes according to form. The St. Thomas Augustana game was, again, kind of like that Western, maybe at that high of a skill level, but, it was like back and forth and 1-1 game and anybody's game. So now St. Thomas, second year in a row, plays Minnesota State for a chance. Last year they were not eligible for the NCAAs had they won that game. This year they are. So trying to get there for the first time in Division I program history. Last but not least, the Big Ten with Michigan State also getting knocked off by Ohio State, who, they clobbered Wisconsin the week before. I'm like, hey, all right. But, Wisconsin's been up and down. But then they go in and beat Michigan State. So, and that was an overtime. But still, I don't know what it is about Ohio State, man. They, even on their down years, they managed to get better. That's a testament to coaching, obviously. But that by the end of the year, even on their down years when they're rebuilding, they managed to, it seems a pattern in the past where they've pulled it together by the end of the year. And they're certainly doing that now. So, only one more team stands in the way of them stealing a bid, as they say.
Yeah, and let's be honest, I don't think anybody really saw it coming. Yeah. Especially, again, look at their November, right? Their November wasn't great. Their January wasn't great. They really didn't start to put it together. If you look, I don't know, they've won 2 games in a row here, and just kind of thumbing through their schedule. It's only the third time this season they've won back-to-back. Fourth time this season they've won back-to-back games. It's kind of nuts.
Yeah. No, I know. But
they just never strung together a run, but maybe this is the time. They beat 2 pretty good teams on the road. So
it was a tough year for them. They, like I said, they were rebuilding a bit. They've been a very solid program over the years, but they've had years where they've had to step back, and this was one of them. But they could have been Christopher Eberle, who's been a great goalie in the past, just did not have a good year at all. But then all of a sudden now, he's got it click back in. So, at that point, who knows? Now they got to go to Yost, but it's not like Munn was easy. Michigan State. So, but I will say Michigan, they were all over Penn State this past weekend. If they play their A game, I don't see anyone beating them anywhere. But, you never know what night. Well, they will not have their A game. Will it be this weekend, the next weekend, or never? But they look pretty impressive. They got it all. Ivan Kovic is back and playing well in net. They're deep and, hate them or not, here they are, and they're the number 1 overall seed. They're going to be, and let's see someone try to beat them. But you never know. I don't know. I suppose if Ohio State's done it so far, but yeah, I think the only thing that can get Michigan in trouble is discipline issues, and they've had that happen to them in the past with extremely talented teams. Even more talented than this team, really. And lost in the Frozen Four because of some of that kind of stuff. And the goaltending wasn't as great, let's just say that, too. This year, they're playing better with that, so hopefully they can, hold on to it. And Ivan Kovic is much better than any goalie they've had in I don't know how long.
Oh, yeah, I would say in quite a while. He's the X factor. And they survived. Let's face it, they survived when he was out of the lineup. Stephen Peck didn't lose a game, but he's a game changer. Ivan Kovic's a game changer.
I had to vote today for my top 3 after voting for the 10 earlier, and I will say that I had a latecomer to the party there. So guess who? Michael Robel. I think he's rocketed up the charts as far as potential Richter candidacy. Augustine is up there. Zacher is up there. Josh Kotai of Augustana. If you look at him, he wound up leading the nation in goals saved above expected, right? With 30. It's like a plus 30.
It's nuts.
But Robel's up there, and his save percentage is up there, and he's been coming on like gangbusters the last 2 months. So
I'm just looking at this now. 10 games in the second half, he allowed 1 goal or less.
Yeah.
It's bonkers. And 4 shutouts.
There is something to be said for play down the stretch and in big games, and that's where he may have gotten himself above some other guys here. And then, I'll know for sure in these next couple weeks if they make the NCAAs, which is still, on the line here. All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Class, today we're talking men's ice hockey. Open your textbooks. Join thousands of other screaming fans for an in-person experience you have to see to believe. It's the NCAA Men's Frozen 4, April 9th and 11th in Las Vegas. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4.
How many teams are in the Men's Frozen 4?
Please leave.
We're here with Colorado College coach Kris Mayotte. And, Coach, thanks for coming on. And, by the way, we've been talking quite a lot this year about the Mayotte rule, which got implemented thanks to your comment on our podcast a couple years ago, I think it was. So the whole conference tournaments, I mean, this is nerdy stuff, right? Because maybe it didn't matter this year. I didn't check, but I thought it was a great rule that the conference tournaments just are straight up home and away waiting. So I actually wrote that they should just do that for all games at this point because I'm not sure it matters anymore.
Yeah, I saw some of the stats that you guys have been sharing in terms of home away, wins, losses. And I think you could certainly make the argument on conference play. The non-conference play, it's still in there for a reason. The reason it was put in was, to make sure certain teams traveled and you weren't just buying 10 non-conference home games and essentially, booking your ticket to the NCAA tournament. So I still think the non-conference makes sense. It's good for college hockey. We always talk about the growth of college hockey. We always talk about, how do you do it, the importance of it, and whether it's home sites for the NCAA tournament or whatever. But still, the coolest way is that North Dakota goes to Alaska Anchorage. Right. Or North Dakota goes to Canisius. And all of a sudden, the kids in Buffalo get to see that type of brand, right? Or Michigan goes to Canisius and they get to see that type of brand. And so, the big programs in college hockey traveling and being a draw is still, I think, a really important part to growing the game and keeping college hockey healthy. So, conference schedule, it's a balanced schedule. We really don't even have any say in it. So whether there's home away bonuses, weight in it, I'm indifferent on that. But non-conference, I think, is still pretty beneficial.
There's been a lot of talk when it comes to growing things too. There's been a lot of talk of television, and I know there's always a desire for the TV coverage to be different, national coverage maybe on TV to be different. You guys had CBS there for a very long time. Is there any, do you think, at least for your league specifically, have you heard of any movement towards national TV exposure again?
I think we're still trying to figure out the best path there. There's so many opportunities now, I think, with different platforms, whether how much of it is streaming, how much of it is prime time, all of those things. I can tell you one of the things that I always thought made a ton of sense when I was in the East, whether it's ECAC or Hockey East, was doing something, on a Tuesday. You think about MACtion, right? With college football, why can't we find a way to get Clarkson versus St. Lawrence on a Tuesday night? Why can't we find a way to get Providence versus Brown on a Tuesday night or whatever it is? But I think when you have proximity, there's a lot of potential there. Whether it's us in Air Force, we could do it, right? Us in Denver could do it. And so just finding ways to be creative. It's a lot of times we beat the table on growing the game until it's our game our game time has to change, or the day of week that we have to play has to change. And then all of a sudden people have a different feel on it. But, you think about basketball and the times that they play those games, and they're the most important games of the year, and the schedule is all over the place. And I just find, when it comes to hockey, people are less likely to budge on those things. They really don't like breaking routine. And I think there's opportunity there. If we're really serious about how we want to grow it, expand your exposure and be willing to do it on a Tuesday, Wednesday night if that's what it takes.
I hear you. Well, these are all interesting topics, and that's why you're here, by the way. I appreciate it because I love talking to different coaches about and it's 64 different opinions now. But some of the topics that are going to come up, we just touched on a couple of them. The other one is the expanded rosters, which I don't know how much say hockey will have in that. But, I mean, obviously the NCAA House settlement mandated it be 26, and there's a lot of talk. Everyone wants to try it. Not everyone, try to expand. I talked to some of the coaches in the Ivy League. They're like, no, we're fine. Like, because they don't have a limit, and they want you guys to be limited to 26. That's like 2 extra players for them to get hold of, possibly. So they look at it from a totally different perspective. Like, how do you look at that?
I think anybody who's opted in, obviously, when you first saw it, the number, it never felt right. And there's countless scenarios that we can look back on where teams are playing shorthanded, teams aren't fielding full lineups, and that's not what we want either. And it's not like we need a 30-man limit, but 26 is really challenging when you consider the length of the season that we play, how long it spans, how much we practice, how many games we play. It's a tough scenario, and I know you've talked to a couple different coaches about it. There was a sentiment that if we got everybody on board, like maybe we could file a waiver and make a push, and it just seems like it's a lot more challenging than that. That it's a lot more bleak of an outlook in terms of changing that number. And I'm sure the NCAA came up with it for certain reasons, and how the math figures out with the men's and women's scholarships and roster limits and all of that, how that comes into play. But you look at some of the numbers that they came up for with rosters and how big certain roster limits are in certain sports versus how small ours are. You got to remember, on a home weekend, we can dress 22 players. I don't know that there's any other roster that you could play 22 players and you only have 4 extra on your roster and they consider that the right number. So it's a disappointing number, that's for sure. I guess, like you said, there are programs out there that aren't opting in, and those of us that are opting in, we have benefits. I understand the benefits.
Right, exactly.
But when you're talking about, student athlete health and safety, I think it's a number that is pretty a tough pill to swallow.
Where do you stand on, you mentioned the number of games you guys play. Where do you stand on more games? I know I've heard a couple of coaches mention that recently. There was I'm blanking on who it was. There was a hockey.
It was right on our podcast. David Carl, not afraid to speak his mind on that.
No, but there was another one too. I don't remember if it was Mike Cavanaugh or Greg Carvel. There was a hockey's coach that was talking about it, I think, this past week as well, expanding the number of games.
I told David that was even a bigger climb than the rosters, because you talk about the Ivy League schools and whatnot. They're not going. I mean, they just scrounge to get to 30.
Listen, in theory, of course, we would love to play more games. I think that's, I think that's why we want to do it. And I know Mike Hastings was just on with somebody, beating the same drum. And I think anybody, we'd love more games. I like our model. I like how it works. I like how much we get to practice, but there's so much more that goes into it than just saying you'd like more games. All of a sudden we're in this rev share NIL landscape where, we're asking for more from schools and administration. And so, then we're going to say, and, we're going to add an extra travel weekend, or we're going to add 2 more travel weekends to it. In turn, you could say, hey, we're going to get 2 more weekends of home games as well.
Right.
And for some programs, that's a benefit, right? For some programs, the season ticket holders, the season ticket sales, the sponsorships, it makes a ton of sense. But to assume that, just because there are a tier of programs that really benefit from your home gate and things like that, to assume that makes sense for everybody, I think is pretty presumptive. There's nothing better than a Friday night, in a college barn. And if you can get more of those, obviously that's better. But, sitting in this chair, you're a lot more than just a hockey coach. There's budgets and there's an obligation to the school and a lot of different things that weigh on decisions. And I just think that's there's a lot to bite off there.
I think that tier is more like 10 schools where it's a net positive revenue-wise. So, and I don't know, as I told David, I feel like the argument has been won with the NHL as far as like what's a better development path, or even at least even development path in terms of the amount of games played. Like that old canard about like how college hockey's, lesser because they play fewer games. I think that's out the window at this point. So I'm not even that worried about it from that standpoint, but that's just me. Anyway, let's move on. Before we get into your team specifically, and where you guys stand. As diplomatically as possible, talking about other players in the league, I know Max Plant just won NCHC Player of the Year. You know how much I love Eric Polkamp. We've talked about that. I see him here a lot, but I mean, not just for that, but I mean, they're obviously both great players. There's a lot of great players out there. I'm going to assume you voted for Max. I don't know. Just tell me, like, what are you seeing out there as far as, like, the Hobie race is going on with where those things stand?
I think I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of great players. You look at the stats right now, and it's spread across the board, whether it's, freshmen, seniors, anything in between, whether it's first-round draft picks, potential picks, anything in between. I think college hockey and the game is in such a great spot right now that you have different leagues up at the top of the stats leaders. The 5 years that I've been in this league, I think Max is the best forward that I've seen in this league in that time in terms of how much he impacts the game.
And that's saying a lot, by the way. You've had a lot of good players in the NCHC.
And there's a ton. And Denver's had a ton. Western Michigan's obviously had them. North Dakota, obviously. I thought Tyson Gross was phenomenal this year.
You had Noah Laba?
All of them, right? And you look at, he played 21 and a half minutes a night for them. He plays in every situation. It's power play, penalty kill. He can play against your top line and match up. They don't save him just to play against, easier matchups. Like, he's the guy that they put out against who they think your best line is. And so there's just so much that he does, and how he plays the game, I think is, when you describe a winning hockey player and what it all means outside of just box score, he does so much. I mean, he is hard on pucks. He wins races. He wins battles. He's inside the dots constantly. He gets to the net really well, and he's got eyes in the back of his head. Like, he can make any play on the rink without being a risky player. His rate of execution is just really, really high. And we're fortunate in this league that, you could go up and down anybody's roster. Arizona State, like Cruz Lucius had a great year this year. Bennett Shimmick had a great year this year. You can go up, Morozov kid at Miami had a great year this year. I mean, you can go up and down anybody's roster, and their best players are elite players. Same with Denver and Eric. Like, he is a threat every time he's on the ice. And because of how he can shoot a puck, he defends hard, all of those things. And so it's been fun to watch college hockey this year. It's been fun to see the influx of talent and what it meant, and how I think college hockey went how we expected it to go, that anybody could beat anybody on any given night. But for me, Max Plant, and the way that he played this year and what he was for their team as a sophomore, obviously playing with his brother in Shogby for most of the year. But he was just such an important piece to that team and kind of them getting back. Obviously they're playing in a championship game coming up this weekend. And I think for the role that he plays for them, that's why, for me, he was the player of the year in our league.
Want to ask you about one of your guys. You guys added Mats Lindgren at the break. One of the few college players this year. There's been others that have played some pro hockey before coming to college. I think most of that is due to the fact that the CHL rule changed within a time period where they still had collegiate eligibility by their age. I mean, they probably would have made that decision right out of junior if it was available to them. But he came in and made an impact, right? 23 or 24 minutes a night, 10 points in 18 games. What type of impact did he make for you guys in the second half? And do you think that more players, because my theory is that there'll be fewer cases like him and Justin Gillett, Merrimack, and others, because those guys are just going to come out of the CHL now and go to school. This is not going to be an every year thing where we're seeing former pros come to college. Maybe it might be there for another year or two, but after that, I feel like it's going to not be a thing anymore. Would you agree?
I agree. I don't think it'll last very long. And in part, like you said, because it'll probably just become the known path. Maybe you go and try pro. And one of the things with Mats was he signed young. He signed a year early. He didn't age out in junior. He signed early. And so when he signed and it didn't go his way, he had an AHL contract this summer, that once the rules started to change and you started to see guys who had signed pro get eligibility, he broke his contract. And again, like you said, I think it'll start to just be the path that they choose, because there is the eligibility part, not necessarily in getting eligibility, but how many years of eligibility you get, and what you have to do academically to set yourself up that way. So I don't think there will be many of these instances in the future. He was fantastic for us, and it was something that we started. We came into the year with 8 defensemen, and again, we opted in, so we had a cap. So we came into the year with 8 defensemen, and then we lose Max Burkholder for the year in Game 3. The other thing that happened was in Game 3, we lost Philip Blais-Savoy. He had knee surgery early. So, we had a stretch of 8 weeks there where we had 6 healthy defensemen. So that is what put us into looking for what's an option, can we add? And fortunately, we had one more roster spot in terms of our cap. We hadn't reached our limit prior to the year. And then so when we had the injuries, we started looking, and we weren't going to add unless we weren't going to add just to add, because we knew we were getting Blais back. We wanted to make sure we found something that we thought really made sense and could benefit us and be beneficial. And Mats was committed to Michigan back when it was the early recruiting process, and ultimately chose to sign in the Dub. But I was getting to Michigan as he was making the decision to sign. So I was somewhat familiar with him, familiar with his game, kind of tracked his path a little bit. And so, when his name popped up as someone who was looking, and I will say the way it was working was there were a handful of schools that were trying to get him eligible for the fall, and he couldn't get there for the fall. It just couldn't happen in time. And so stayed on it, got eligible for the second semester, and then was why we were able to add. And he just brought a moxie. His skating ability is fantastic. His ability to score and to shoot a puck is really high end. He had 40 points twice in the Western League. And so he has a moxie with the puck. He has a moxie with the way he plays, the way he skates, the way he attacks the game. We're really excited about him. Think he has the potential to be a true number one.
Well, I think whatever, you guys are a historic program. I mean, you've been there 5 years now. I think what everyone wants to know around the country, is CC okay? You know what I mean? Not in terms of how your results are, on the ice right now, but in this landscape, because people know, again, historic program, you have a lot of alumni out there, but it's a small school. So what does that work? And, we talk about all the money that's out there these days, and you hear everything from some schools from $0 to $1 million a year. And obviously I know you can't talk about specifics, but just generally speaking, where do you guys fit in and all that? Are you okay? And can you, compete with at least the NCHC schools in that regard?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the simple answer is yes, and I'll dive into more. and the thing that we all know is if you can compete with the NCHC schools, you can compete with anybody, right? I think first and foremost, the job that I took 5 years ago is very different than the job that it is today with the landscape change and everything you just touched on. And so when I got here, obviously there was a huge recommitment to the hockey program and its success and how important it is to the school. With building Robeson Arena, putting it on campus. There's a lot of different ways to spend $70 million on a college campus. Right. I think stuff that we all know, but maybe not everybody knows, is it's not the head hockey coach that gets to decide that you're going to build an arena. It's not the athletic director that just gets to decide you're going to build an arena, right? It's the board of trustees. It's the president of the school. It takes everybody has to be on board, right? All the decision makers, and you only make the decision to do something like this if you feel like it's a benefit to the entire school. And that's where CC really made a huge commitment. And I remember one of the things when I was talking to our athletic director, Leslie Irvine, about taking the job and leaving Michigan to take this job. One of the things that we talked about was, we are going to attract people to our program because of the arena. And what you can't have happen is you can't have it just be the cover of a book, be the only thing that's attractive. Is once we attract those people, the program has to be at a level in terms of, our sports science, our nutrition, how we develop players, the resources invested in their growth. All of that has to match what people see. Because in the world of the transfer portal, if it doesn't meet expectations, people are quick to just find something else. And when you have the building that we have, people are going to have really high expectations. And so how do you make sure you match that? And, what I can say is when I first got here, there was a commitment to financial aid in terms of how we stacked financial aid with scholarship dollars that gave us a big number. Our school commits $2.4 million in aid to our team every single year. Now, granted, it's $100,000 a year essentially to go to CC, but you compare that to some other schools and what that costs, what the scholarship cost looks like at other schools. That's a significant investment. And they did that in conjunction with building a $70 million facility. Then, as soon as Alston money became a thing, we sponsored Alston money. And so we gave academic award. And so we stepped up there. And as soon as revenue share and your ability to opt in became a thing, our RAD was adamant that we're opting in. We did not put in our revenue sharing plan the first year. A big part of what we wanted to do in the first year was we're going to opt in and we're going to just sit back and get a feel for the landscape and see where we need to come in to be competitive, both in our league, but nationally at the same time. And in that year, we found a way. We obviously have some great donors. We have a great alumni network that is passionate about CC hockey, and then great support from our school already, where, I think we talked about potential tiers of where teams are in revenue sharing. And we're going to be, if we're not in the top tier, we're at the top of that second tier in terms of what we can offer. And I think programs are going to do it differently, but a huge benefit that we have. Yes, it's a 2,000 student school. We have a great endowment. We have great alumni who are passionate, who have massive capacity to help our program. And then at the end of the day, we are our program's SEC's football team. Yeah. We are the most premier program at this school. And so it's actually a huge, what people might think is a death sentence for CC is actually going to work in the opposite. It's going to end up being a huge benefit for our program.
Where, every school's different in terms of how they utilize whatever money that they have. Where do you see it more in retention or in recruitment that you need to focus on?
I think you're going to see two different plans or blueprints executed. One is going to be, how do we get the next Gavin McKenna? How do we get the next Porter Martone? How do we get the next Verhoff? What does that look like? How much does it cost? Are we going to go and go after those? And you're going to have some schools that's a big part of their plan. And that's going to be a big part of their budget. Now, they're also going to have to work to retain those players. But then I think you're going to see, a chunk of schools that it's, hey, we're happy where we're recruiting. Maybe we don't need to reach for that really high-end top-tier recruit. We can continue to recruit, at a certain level. We just have to make sure we keep our players, that they're not leaving early. They're not leaving for an American League deal. They're not going to the portal for an NIL deal somewhere else. We're retaining them. And I think you're going to see that we're going to land a lot more in the retaining side of things. We're still in the recruiting process. You still pitch what our retaining model looks like and what those future dollars look like. But again, for us, I think it's going to be a lot more of a predictable escalation of money available to players the longer they're here. The more they invest in CC, the more they do for CC, the more they're going to get. That's interesting,
because I've talked to a couple of coaches, more so out east recently, who have said, it almost doesn't feel like you're recruiting to build a program anymore. You're just recruiting to build next year's team, and it's very kind of year to year. But it seems like setting up a model like that, you are trying to still build a program and keep guys as long as you can. That'll be more challenging, of course, I'm sure, for other schools, but there is that kind of dichotomy now of like there's some schools that are kind of just building it year to year because of the portal. They almost know, like, hey, if I get this guy, a lot of Atlantic hockey schools, you get a guy that comes in and has a big freshman year, he's probably gone, right? Like, whereas before you didn't really have that option.
100%. And there's just so much more talent. Like what the CHL opening up has done is if you think about, say you just wanted the USHL and TDP, right? And that's where you wanted to be good. I mean, there's 17 players in that entire league available to you that run the first power play as a defenseman, right? 17. And we just opened 60 more of those. So now we're at 77 power play one defensemen.
Yeah.
So there are players available. And the talent is incredible. And so, again, still for us, it's what wins at this level. Certainly, you have incredibly talented players at different programs, and we have access to, guys like Gavin McKenna, but that's not new, right? Owen Power played college hockey. Macklin Celebrini played college hockey. Adam Fantilli played college hockey. That's not new to us, but there is just a deeper pool of players with more pedigree coming in. And so it's going to allow teams to build it however they want, right? And if you just say there are teams in our league that are really good at using the transfer portal, Arizona State, Western Michigan, great examples of teams that use it at a high rate and a highly successful rate. Mm-hmm. But then there are teams that, like Denver, that they bring in these special players, but they bring them and they add them to a core. And that's where I think it still makes the most sense is that there's this core that you develop, this core that, like we have guys right now, and I don't know that we've had this yet since I've been here, quite honestly, that you sit in these exit meetings and these meetings at the end of the year and they say, I'm a Tiger. Like, I'm a Tiger. And they talk about other people in the same way. They say he's a Tiger, or I don't know if he's a Tiger, right? Like, and so I still think that's incredibly valuable. I
hope you're right. Let's put, not just for you, but for everybody, because that's the transfer stuff is probably worse than the money stuff, as far as being able to just go anywhere in a drop of a hat.
And we could debate that for a really, really long time. But I still truly believe that you want guys that are Tigers. Yeah. You want guys that are just committed to this place because they believe in it. They love their teammates. And if you get the right mix of those guys, I think that wins out in the end. Yeah. And again, some places I think have shown the ability to create that very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a little bit of what's changed is it doesn't mean that you can't have guys at the end of the year saying we're Tigers if this was their first year here. Of course you can, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can do that, but you need that core. Like you think about Western last year, Alex Bump was there the entire time. Sholin was there the entire time. Washi was there the entire time. Like you still need the core guys, and you can add pieces in. And where I think hockey is different than other sports at the college level is junior hockey. They're used to trades. They're used to transactions.
I know.
So it doesn't affect the locker room the same. Right. But a place like CC, we think we can continue to build a program and retain players so that they're not going anywhere because they're Tigers and they want people here who want to be Tigers with them. And so you talk about the rev share plan that we've built, that we pitched the school that we're implementing. It's about having people be Tigers for their entire college career.
Well, last thing before I let you go here officially, get us excited about your team for next year. Who's your goalie? Starting there.
Well, I think we're going to have two.
Yeah.
The Jackson Unger this year, I think came into a spot where he understood, the guy that he was competing with in Caden, and what Caden has meant to our program. and how hard it was going to be to take games from him. And that was really my message to Jackson was, you got to understand, I'm not going to give you games.
Yeah.
If you take games from Caden, they're yours. But that's up to you, right? I'm not giving them to you. Don't expect me to give them to you, but you have the right, you have the ability to take them. And if you look at what he was able to do for us this year, I mean, the teams that he played, the games he played in were Providence, North Dakota, Arizona State, Denver, St. Cloud, Duluth, Western. We didn't hold his hand through a start, right? We didn't try and give him, a one that we thought was going to be an easy one for him. The very first one was Providence at home. He was phenomenal in the game. We lost 2-1, but he was great. And it's been his pedigree. He won a championship in the Western League. It's been his pedigree. He showed that ability here. And then we have Michael Pradell committed, third-round pick to Detroit, playing in Tri-City. He was the Slovakian starting goalie for World Junior this year. He's an incredibly talented goalie with a huge upside, a lot of pedigree there. And he's an unbelievable kid. And that's what really stood out about him in the recruiting process is, he had the opportunity to be traded at the trade deadline out of Tri-City. And he felt that what they had done for him the year before really helped him have the year that he had this year with the World Junior and where he got drafted. And he really just wanted to be loyal to it. And so he didn't want to be traded. He wanted to stick there. And I think you talk about what we just got done talking about, Tigers, right? Guys that want to be somewhere and want to see it through and want to see it win because they're a part of it and they believe in it. That's what stands out about Michael. So we're excited for both of them. We're going to give them both a crack early. And if they're both really good, you'll see them both consistently.
Get hurt in the game? We tough it out. Feel exhausted? We push on. Feeling down? We pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. But there are times when bootstraps aren't enough. When stress gets to us and we need to talk to someone about what we're really going through. So we're going to reach out because sometimes mental health is not a one-person job. Visit loveyourmindtoday.org. That's loveyourmindtoday.org. Brought to you by the Huntsman Mental Health Institute and the Ad Council.
All right, back in our final segment there. Good chat with Kris Mayotte. I mean, he likes to tell us all his ideas, just like David Carl does, and Mike Cavanaugh, and a lot of guys. And, unfortunately, everyone's got a little bit different idea. And so, getting that consensus is always the hard part. But, wonders never cease, because I always thought the consensus over the major junior thing was never really a thing, or the regional thing. And now, maybe it will be. Of course, the CHL stuff was foisted upon everybody at some point, so they had no choice. But
it was.
I think everyone came around to that. So they may come around on the regional stuff. They may come around on the roster limit. Like I said, though, there are a number of schools who can't opt in or won't opt in who don't want that. So, I think that's what he was referring to when he said there might be more hurdles than we thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. It's funny. You don't consider some of that stuff. It sounds so easy to just be like, well, we're going to play more games or we're going to do this. Or we're going to do that. It makes more sense. But you got to remember, they need to get these things passed through a vote, and it doesn't make sense for everybody necessarily.
Yeah. I do think that, as I was saying, the more games thing is probably harder than the roster thing, because I really don't think there's that many schools who make money on it or will, and yeah, I mean, not that anyone cares about the Ivy Leagues, but that disparity will rise, so they'll kick and scream about it. So anyway, but I also think it's fine the way it is. As a matter of fact, I mean, I'm not a hockey coach, but except for my beer league team, but I think the roster limit's fine too, to be honest with you. But that's just me.
If enough schools are making money on their games, the one advantage they have is it's not like they have to go back to the Players Association and say, like, well, if you're going to expand the games, now the salaries need to go up. Like, it's all, none of that expense is going to, it's the game day expense is going to stay the same, but the coaches' salaries will stay the same. The game day expenses will go up. You have to, get security guards and ushers and all that stuff. But, for the teams that can draw, I mean, I'm trying to think there, like if you draw 5,000 people a night and there's several schools that are in that group, you're making 100 to 150,000 a night just on ticket sales, not even including concessions. So
some places do for sure.
Yeah. It just doesn't make sense for enough schools. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of
There's also
times
some schools that draw 200 people a night.
the cost of traveling somewhere, outweighs whatever you're going to get in your home games.
And that's the thing. Like, I come to it from an Eastern perspective where it is much easier to do it here. I understand that.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing too. Like, as we've said before, though, you can get games in that dead period now that happens between, the first week of December and the first week of January. Feels like you could probably squeeze a couple in there if you wanted to.
Sure.
If revenue wasn't or expense wasn't a problem. And but the other thing too, again, it's funny. Like, there's always this clamor for on-campus, regionals and conference tournaments. And, don't get me wrong, obviously the atmospheres at some of these games have been great, and the Denver game was great, and the Big Ten games, and, we saw Liner Rink packed for the ECAC quarterfinals, and I'm going to be at Denver again this weekend. But the way that they've had to set these things up, it's one and done. And it used to be at least one best of three, if not 2 rounds of best of 3. And you played a lot more games just by doing that in your own league.
It's a good point.
And,
yeah, it's a good point.
You know what I mean? They've gotten it down to now where the Big Ten is, you might play a game or 2, but it used to be at least 2 and then 3, 4, maybe 5 if it went went to third game. And a lot of series did go to third game. So, you got to remember that we've taken a lot of games out of the postseason. So anyway, whatever that's worth, just something to keep in mind. All right, let's quickly, before we go here, the league tournaments. First of all, Minnesota State St. Thomas. Got any thoughts there as we get ready to watch the first one on Friday night?
Yeah, so Minnesota State, I thought this was going to be a year where they had to retool a little bit. They completely cram that down my throat. So I'm not going to pick against them twice. I got to feel like they're the home team too. They figure out a way at the end of the year to get that 1 seed. So
yep.
They've got to cook it. It should be a good one though, because St. Thomas is just as good as them. Most of these games, it feels like a cop-out saying it. People are going to say, have some conviction here. A lot of these games this weekend feel like coin flips. They really do, and this is one of them.
No, I mean, I think it would be a great story if just St. Thomas, makes the NCAAs again with Rico there. Hasn't been there since the Miami heyday, but I don't really have a dog in the fight. So other than, generally as humans, we like to see new blood, but there's no offense to Minnesota State, that's for sure. For also Friday, Hockey East and the ECAC, the only 2 schools left that meet for a final weekend in a neutral site. They will have their semifinals. We talked about that a bit before. Merrimack, UMass, BC, UConn. Like you said, those are elimination games, not just for the Hockey East, but for the entire NCAAs as well.
Yeah, and that's, again, not usually the case, right?
Right.
Not usually the case. So that should make it a pretty fun weekend. Just because usually there's always usually in hockey you get a couple of teams, at least one, if not 2, where that their fate is sealed before they even get there. They don't necessarily you want to win the conference championship, but you don't have to win at the Garden to make it happen. Now this is not the case this weekend. All 4 teams playing for their lives. Yeah.
We were kind of Clarkson ruined the party as far as it being the Ram Pecknell Bowl there in Lake Placid this weekend because his former player, Reed Cashman, is the Dartmouth head coach, and his former assistant, Ben Sires, the Princeton head coach. But Clarkson went ahead and upset the apple cart, so we'll see if those 2 wind up playing each other, or maybe Clarkson Cornell, or Casey Jones was the head coach for a number of years. Maybe they'll be in the final. Then you go to Saturday. Of course, those championships will be had, and then you've got the 3 other championship games happening unto itself, Sacred Heart and Bentley. Who knows? Sacred Heart, first time in the Atlantic final since 16 years ago, which I didn't realize because they've had some good years lately, but haven't made the final. So they are trying to make the NCAA tournament for the first time. They've never won a conference tournament, regular season, or anything at Sacred Heart. So there you go.
Yeah, well, investment pays off eventually, and they built that arena. They really invested in their program, and they get a chance to go to the NCAAs now.
Absolutely. And we talked about Ohio State, Michigan a bit before. Again, Michigan firing on all cylinders. It's hard to beat. They've beaten them, Ohio State, all 4 meetings this season so far. They lead the country in goals per game. Their power play is at 30%. Jack Ivankovic is back and looking great. I mean, T.J. Hughes, Will Horkoff, Michael Hage. I don't know, but Ohio State's done it so far, So I guess we can't put it past them.
The way this year has gone, I don't put anything past anybody.
The funny thing is Ohio State finished the regular season losing twice to Notre Dame.
I know.
So, which came in last place. I mean,
yep.
This is a Cinderella story if there ever was one, I suppose. But the bubble teams will be biting their nails in Ann Arbor on Saturday, or watching Ann Arbor. And then finally, last but not least, Minnesota Duluth at Denver. I was wondering how I was going to cover the game in Grand Forks, and thanks to Duluth, I don't have to worry about it. I can just drive 10 minutes to Denver now and cover the NCHC championship game for the first time in my life. So there you go.
There you go. That one feels like another flip of the coin.
And yeah. They played a couple games not too long ago at Magnus Arena, and they were games that were both close. 4-3 final on a Friday and a 1-0 overtime game. Both went to Denver, but easily could have gone the other way. I mean, there was some questionable calls, let's just say, that Scott Sandelin wasn't too thrilled about, and I really was hard to disagree with him, but I mean, it is what it is. But that's just to point out how tight the games were. And, I know Adam Guyan, coming back off of the Olympics, has been really good. I know, for the times this year where it hasn't been as consistent for him, he's got a .909 save percentage, but lately he's been good for sure. And then, of course, Max and Zam. And we talked about that, 1 and 1A as far as the top dogs there offensively. They broke up the line with Shagabe last weekend. Obviously, it worked. They beat North Dakota 5-1. So we'll see if they, you would imagine that they would continue with that now.
Yeah, I would think so. They've kind of flirted with that, I think, over the course of the year as well, right?
Oh, yeah, here and there, but I don't know if it worked as well as it did, like what just did this past weekend with them.
Oh, that's true.
But
yeah.
Last but not least, just Denver. Again, we talked about Johnny Hicks last week, and it's like, when is that glass slipper gonna fall off or whatnot? And he was phenomenal against Western Michigan again. I mean, that kid is a machine. The only goal that was scored was a deflection off his own player's shaft of his stick, went flying up over his shoulder, but he came into the weekend with a 1.04 goals against average, and now left there with a 1.03. And his save percentage went from 960 to 961. So these gaudy numbers are not going down; they're getting better.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Ridiculous. That's pretty good. And again, I've seen him play, so it's not like hey, the numbers and maybe his defense is so good and he's seeing outside shots. And no, I watched him against Western. He's listed at 5'10". I'm not sure that's even the case. And somehow just like the Energizer Bunny in there. Just boop, 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 boop. It's crazy. So hopefully I didn't jinx him, but it should be a fun one. All right, we'll get out of here. We'll see you next week. And we'll try to do a show as early as possible after the selections, whatever that may be, Sunday, Monday, as soon as we can. And we're available, so we'll break down the brackets as we go to the NCAA tournament. See you then.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of the College Hockey News Insiders Podcast. To submit your listener questions, please send them to @CHN News on X. And for the best college hockey content around, including features, the CHN Team of the Week, stats, rankings, and so much more, visit us at collegehockeynews.com. Until next time, we hope you enjoy all of this week's great on-ice action, and we'll be back to break it down on our next edition. For Adam Woden and Mike McMahon, this has been the College Hockey News Insiders Podcast.